dong! The witch is dead. Bayern Munich has fallen. Olympus has fallen. The last great bastion of this era that we used to exist in, of one team dominating seemingly every league, is done. Probably should have happened last season if it wasn't for Borussia Dortmund bottling an unbelievable chance to win the league, and they were probably the team that deserved to win the league, but instead it was Bayer Leverkusen. And what Leverkusen is doing is nothing short of absolutely remarkable. But I'm going to take part in the age-old, human tradition here of only really respecting something once they're dead. Like a classic artist or a musician, once they die, you reevaluate what they have accomplished in their life. And with Bayern Munich, this is their death. The funeral is the giant party Bayer Leverkusen's probably still throwing on its field right now, because Bayern Munich was killed spectacularly. But what it accomplished has not diminished. As annoyed as I always was by Bayern Munich for crushing the dreams of underdogs like Borussia Dortmund repeatedly and consistently with depressing consistency, 11 consecutive Bundesliga titles is absolutely insane. It's a stranglehold on a league that few could scarcely imagine. It feels like Manchester City has been dominating the Premier League. They've only won 4 of the last 5. Even Paris Saint-Germain, PSG in France, has not managed to string together more than 4 or 5 consecutive league titles, despite spending half of that entire league's wage budget just for their team seemingly every season. They still blew the league to Lille a couple years ago. It is unbelievably difficult to win 11 consecutive Bundesliga titles. And it wasn't, the Bundesliga is better than the French league. And PSG has more money made available to it because of the level of investors that are behind it than Bayern Munich does, because Bayern Munich has to earn all of the money that it's going to spend. And now that FFP's kicked in, things are a little different at PSG and everywhere else. But Bayern Munich was competing in a better league. You had a Borussia Dortmund team that at one point during this Bayern Munich run was good enough to make it to the Champions League final. You've got an Eintracht Frankfurt team that went on to actually win a European trophy within the last 2 seasons, right? This is a league full of teams that were actually competitive, that were making deep runs. RB Leipzig consistently finding its way into the Champions League knockouts, as well as Borussia Dortmund. This is a league that should not be dominated the way that it was by Bayern Munich for 11 seasons. And that depressing consistency, that ability to vacuum up the best players from all of the teams around them, to operate the way that Florentino Perez has seemingly been operating the last couple of seasons for the better part of a decade, right? The way Real Madrid's handled its personnel acquisition the last couple of years is the way Bayern Munich's been handling its player acquisition for 15 years, 20 years. I mean, seemingly forever. How many beers have been dunked on the head of the directors of that club celebrating Bundesliga titles? And it did end spectacularly. This also brought about the end of one of the weirdest streaks that was going on in football, which was Kingsley Coman, the player, had a streak where every single senior professional season of his career, he had actually won the domestic league he'd been playing in, starting in 2013 with PSG. He won 2 with PSG, won 2 with Juventus, and then the rest of them he won at Bayern Munich as a player that was seemingly blessed. And the only thing that could come in and ruin that was signing Harry Kane. That is the only thing that could have stopped Kingsley Coman's incredible run. But Bayern had been bleeding. Bayern had been bleeding. And it is entirely fair to say that Bayern should have lost the Bundesliga last year. It was out of their control last year, and Borussia Dortmund bottled it, and Bayern Munich managed to keep the streak going. But what is happening now? If we're talking about how people only seem to respect things, after the artist has died, right? Picasso dies and we reevaluate everything. Van Gogh cuts off his ear and then eventually dies for, I don't know, maybe he died of old age, although I feel like that's unlikely based off the few facts I know about Van Gogh. Then all of a sudden, all of his art is greatly appreciated and he becomes a world-renowned painter. We need to respect what Bayer Leverkusen is doing right now, because as amazing as Bayern Munich was, Bayer Leverkusen is doing something more impressive than Bayern ever did in a single season. Because in 29 matches played, Bayer Leverkusen has won 25 of them. And I've talked about this before, that Bayern Munich, being on 63 points with 5 matches left, that would have been a good enough pace to win the league last year. It's not like Bayern Munich has fallen off a cliff here. Bayer Leverkusen is just better. They're performing better than any single Bayern Munich team ever did, because Bayern Munich in all 11 of those league titles never went unbeaten in order to actually win the league. And not only is this not going unbeaten, 4 draws is it. 74 goals for, 19 goals against. Their championship winning match, which prompted one of the most wholesome looking field stormings you've ever seen, that match that produced this result, 5-0. 5-0 to Bayer Leverkusen. This is a team of destiny. I talk about that. They have incredible plot armor. They score a lot of goals late in matches. I'm sure there are certain tactical things and player development things that Xabi Alonso has done, same as Sir Alex Ferguson used to do, to create a team that can score so effectively towards the end of matches. But they are also utterly dominant. They are still going in the Europa League, where they have an advantage going into the second leg of the quarterfinal, and they are playing in the DFB Pokal final, which is the German Cup, and they're playing against a second division team in that final, which means they are unbelievably prohibitive favorites to complete the German domestic trophy double. Leverkusen had also never won the league before, so this is not a team that had been just on the cusp, like, right, just on the cusp of breaking through. In fact, this is a Fabrizio Romano tweet, so this is very public knowledge here. But when Xabi Alonso took over, October 5th, 2022, the team was second bottom in the Bundesliga and battling against relegation. Now, they were obviously more talented than that showed, but this was not a team that was... This was not a team that was picked to win the title this year. This was a team that was maybe going to be able to participate in some Champions League brouhahaing, but they were not the team that was anointed to be able to end Bayern Munich's run. What Xabi Alonso's done, what the people that run the club at Bayer Leverkusen have done, is nothing short of unbelievable. And just because it's happening in Germany, people are paying less attention to it. And just because Bayer Leverkusen is not the brand name of even an RB Leipzig, no matter how reprehensible they might be as an energy drink, right? The Bayer Leverkusen, people are just assuming this is some sort of lucky run, or that Bayern has fallen off. If Bayern wins 3 of its last 5 matches, which it's Bayern, they probably will, they'll end up with more points than they did last season. And they're still already done chasing the league title with 5 matches to go. Let that sink in. There is also an entirely separate thing that I would like to point out here that I absolutely loved, because Bayer Leverkusen scored its 5th goal in what was essentially the 90th minute of play. And there were already fans like all over the field before that ball went in. Right? They were all right behind the goal. If you actually watch a clip of the actual goal, you can see fans holding the back of the netting and shaking it after the ball went in. And at that point, the exuberance of Bayer Leverkusen fans was so overwhelming that they started to run on the field. Technically, the official hasn't blown the final whistle yet. And you hear that on the broadcast. There's the whistle. 5 seconds into this video, and the clock is barely at 90 minutes. And in a match with 5 goals, and a lot of them scored in the second half, there should be stoppage time. But thank goodness we found the one person left in the world with common sense. I mean, when we've got weird penalty calls happening all over the place, we've got referees blowing the match dead when teams are right in the middle of an attack. Common sense has prevailed here. This match is over. And this is, honestly, the fact that you can blow the whistle right at 90 minutes because the fans are already on the field and they're already having a great time, and they're celebrating their first title in 129 years, I believe it is, of history of Bayer Leverkusen, that you can just end the game. It's one of my favorite things about soccer, about football, that it is open to interpretation. The application of the rules can be subjective in a way that allows for the free flow of the actual game. If this was in the United States, they would have taken 20 minutes to get all the fans off the field, right, to reset everything up so that we could play out the last 4 minutes, the last completely useless 4 minutes of this match at 5-0. Instead, the referee sees that the explosion of happiness is basically already underway, decides to blow the whistle, and the match is over. It's 5-0, and I am 100% okay with that, because instead of ruining the moment, you're able to create this. And how wonderful is this? That's Florian Wirtz. He just rounded out his hat trick. Xabi Alonso celebrated when the witch finally died. Right? When Bayern Munich was finally toppled, it was going to be a big deal. But for it to be a club that had never won Bundesliga title before, 13th club, by the way, in history to win the top league of Germany, it's just special. It's beyond special, a memory that will be cherished by all of those people forever. But this season is not done, right? This season is not done. This club is still doing like stupid, incredible stuff, and it's just worth talking about it. But huge respect to Bayern Munich for doing something that a lot of people would consider impossible, and it is very likely will not happen again in my or any of you guys' lifetimes, winning 11 consecutive domestic titles in any of the top 5 leagues. It is just so hard to create that kind of continuity. And with the amount of attention and reporting and of the effect of social media and just being able to maintain a team pulling in the same direction for that long under a bunch of different managers, it's worth mentioning as well, is beyond impressive. Maybe, though, as Xabi Alonso's already turned down a bunch of advances, maybe we've got the start of a new dynasty, and I'll be forced to eat my own words. But regardless of where anything's going in the future, we are witnessing one of the most special seasons possible, and the cherry on top is the ending of the last great dominant European club in a domestic league. Bayern Munich is toast, baby. They're done.